All right, hello and welcome to another WorldViz webinar. Happy to have you all here, and thanks so much for joining us. It's morning here on the West Coast. We're looking forward to covering the topic today. If this is your first time, welcome. If you're a returning webinar guest, we're excited to have you. So in case you haven't had a chance to kind of review the topic today, we're going to be covering really just, how to navigate a world without trade shows for the time being, how to replace trade show presence by leveraging VR. So we're going to be looking at different options for how you might be able to use this technology as an alternative to, what you might regularly be doing. Now it's in the September, October, November trade show season that I think we're all typically used to. So I was going to give it just a second longer, but looks like we've just got a few attendees. So maybe I'll hold on for one more minute while we see if anybody else filters through. And I'll go ahead and get started in just a second here. All right. Okay, perfect. So I'm just going to get things kicked off. First things first, I'm going to introduce us to our presenters today. So first up, we've got Matthias Pusch. He's our CEO and he's our VP of Sales and Marketing. He's also a co-founder of WorldViz. So here's Matthias. Here comes Felix too. So Matthias down there, and then also Felix. Felix is our product manager for the VizMove product line, and he's a solutions architect at WorldViz as well. So he'll be showing us some hardware here. Awesome. So let me go ahead and just give you guys a quick overview of what we're talking about today in terms of topics. So really, it's going to be a kind of a shorter webinar than we've done in the past. But we're hoping really to kind of give you guys an idea of the way that we approach this current sort of challenge. Obviously, WorldViz, we do trade shows, probably between 6 and 12 trade shows a year. A lot of times we're partnering up with different companies. So we're, in the position that a lot of folks find themselves in right now, which is, we can't do our normal trade shows. So we're going to really talk about when VR is useful to replace that kind of presence that you might be used to. I'll be covering that topic. After that, we're going to have Matthias cover successful examples from our own partners, industry examples that we've seen, how we've actually seen this done in real life, and then cover some of the practical implementations for what's required to successfully do this type of implementation. After that, we'll have a brief live presentation from Felix, who's going to show us a little bit of the hardware that we use to achieve our goals. And then after that, I'm going to talk about content consideration, how you put this different custom content together to create a really engaging experience. And then also just, a really upfront discussion about what it costs to do all these different things. If this is your first time with us, you might not have done this before, but we always do a live Q&A session at the very end. So we've got other folks on the background helping us out. We've got Belle and Bettina who are fielding your questions. So if you guys have any questions, submit them through the inquiry form, and we'll copy and paste them actually at the end of the presentation. And at that point, we'll go ahead and go one by one through the ones that we can that we have time for. So looking forward to doing the Q&A. Without further ado, I'll just get right into it. So if you're new to WorldViz, we've been in the VR space for a very long time. So we've never really done consumer VR. We've always been focused on the more enterprise and academic use cases. So we ourselves actually came out of a UCSB psychology lab back in the early 2000s, and really we're servicing mostly aerospace and other academic customers for the first 10 years or so. Since consumer VR has become a real thing in the last like 4 or 5 years, it's been really exciting to see the way that this technology has changed and become more accessible to a wider range of people. So that's just a little bit of background on us. Won't dwell too long on this. We'll just get right into it. So from our perspective, when you're going to a trade show, there's just a couple of primary ways that you might engage with folks there. One of the ways would be you've got your booth, people are coming by, and you're really attracting new customers, new contacts when they're just walking by the booth. The second, which is one that we do a lot too, is having like targeted meetings that you've set up ahead of time with specific clients. There's other things that you would probably benefit from at a trade show, going out and seeing what other folks in your industry are doing. So, going to industry talks and things like that. But in this case, we're really kind of talking about the sort of customer interactions that you'd be looking for. Our technology is really set up more to service this second use case, the targeted meetings with specific clients. So a lot of this webinar is really going to be focused around that topic. But I'm going to kind of address these large scale events and how those can come in as supplemental material as well, because there's some interesting and pretty cool technology out there at the moment that can kind of replace these large scale events. But just to kind of keep in mind, we were going to, in this webinar, we're going to really be talking about a very specific idea that we have for how to do this trade show replacement. So it's going to center a little bit more on our products than some of our other webinars. But I think hopefully you guys are going to get a really good idea of what we think is an appropriate and good option for doing these types of targeted product demonstrations. So let's talk first about this random encounter type engagement. So I'm sure, or assuming most of you have had a good amount of trade show experience. I myself have worked booths for many days and weeks. This year's a little bit different, so doing webinars instead, which is a fun and new change of pace. But if we're looking to kind of replicate that experience of being at if we're trying to be in a large scale space, there's some interesting options for these kind of mass meeting VR tools. So just a couple that I'll mention here, and there's more. I'm not going to be able to cover all of them, but Mozilla has a solution called Hubs. Hubs is really interesting. We've used it for events ourselves. It's free. It has some customization features. It's not a really super sophisticated customization space, but you can kind of, in these sort of cartoony ways, customize your environment. But what's really nice about Mozilla is that it's super lightweight. It runs on a browser. So nobody has to download an application or anything like that. They can just jump right into a scene, whether it's on their cell phone or a computer or a VR headset, obviously. And they can go around an event space and talk with folks. And what's really cool about these different large scale space things is that they have localized sound. So when you're talking with folks, you can have a room full of people and there's kind of background chatter just like there used to be in real life. But you can have these one-on-one localized sound conversations. So it lends itself more to rather than Zoom where everybody has to kind of go around in a circle taking turns. It really lends itself to these more sort of real life like interactions. AltSpace VR is another very famous one, and that's pictured down here. So that has a little bit more options in terms of control. But it's one of the kind of original event experiences for VR. Big screen is another space where originally it was actually intended as a kind of a way that folks could watch movies together in VR, which is really fun. But it's actually kind of reached out into the enterprise world as well since then and become more of a large scale sharing space. So what are the advantages of using these types of large scale event platforms? I mean, the number one is going to be your large group capacity, right? You can actually accommodate 150, 200 people in this virtual environment. And then because of this sort of large scale mass appeal, they're oftentimes very easy to use, especially for folks who are joining. They probably have a pretty flexible ability to join on a laptop or something like that, right? So that's, I would say, the nice things about these platforms. They're very Second Life-like, if you all are familiar with that, where controlling an avatar and walking around a room with your mouse and keyboard. If we're going to talk about the disadvantages of these types of large-scale engagements, a lot of times you really don't have a lot of option over content creation. From our perspective, especially when you're doing kind of an enterprise targeted experience where you're talking about your own products, you really want to have that end-to-end control and have the ability to really bring in like a high fidelity model of your own product, right? So a lot of the folks that we work with, and Matthias is going to talk about this, are in the manufacturing space. And just having the ability to bring your actual product in, whether it's like a large scale robotic arm or some kind of MRI or blood analysis machine, being able to walk a customer through the product, we find is a real advantage. So these platforms aren't really giving you as much control in terms of bringing in high fidelity content that's specific to your own product line, right? So in other terms, there's maybe some lacking of privacy and control. Mozilla Hubs is a little bit like Zoom in the way that you just are inputting a random code to kind of start a meeting. You don't really have the kind of like kick people out abilities that you might expect in more enterprise softwares. So I just wanted to show one quick video, which is pretty interesting. I believe the platform that this is implemented on is Virbela. I could be wrong about that, but I'm fairly certain that it is. This is an upcoming trade show that's going to be, I think, either in October or November this year. And I just wanted to show this video really quick because it's a very interesting example of how folks are doing this right now. Let's go ahead and check this out. So vrdays.co if you want to see more information about this. So this is very cool because it's actually just a full one-to-one recreation of a trade show floor, right? You've got your different booths, you've got your representatives who are standing at the booths. So it's giving folks the opportunity to really do this kind of trade show experience in a VR setting, right? You could have a VR headset on for this, or you could just be using a mouse and keyboard on your computer. So it's a really interesting way, and I mean, obviously we're getting creative in the ways that we have to engage with customers and engage with the outside world and get the message out about the work that we're doing now. And I think that this is a really good example of just how close to fidelity that we're getting. And I think, as I was mentioning earlier, the ability that you have to just, have these natural random encounters with folks is really what these types of solutions are offering. So I'd encourage you all to check that out if you're interested in that. I'll talk a little bit more about this targeted client meetings here, which is really what we will be focusing on for most of the rest of the webinar. And I just kind of want to frame this for you all so you have an idea of what we do. And what we really do is we actually send these types of what we call Viz boxes, and Felix will talk a little bit more about this during his demo. But we send these hard-sided cases, literally ship them to the client, and then all they have to do is just open up this Pelican case and enter a meeting ID. And we've preloaded everything on the computer, set it all up ahead of time, and they just jump right into a collaborative virtual reality meeting with one of us on the other side. And so you're effectively giving a one-on-one or 1 to 4, 1 to 5. We can have a higher capacity for multiple people, but you're effectively giving this presentation to your targeted client. So in most of the proposals that we do, the large scale projects that we implement, there's always going to be an element of this type of presentation. We like to show our customers exactly how the product's going to look when it's installed. And of course, many of our customers are now using this in their own right. And that's really going to be what Matthias is going to be talking about in just a second here. The advantages of this I kind of alluded to on the last screen, which is sort of the inverse of the advantages of the other one, which is that you're having a private meeting, it's total end-to-end control in terms of the content creation. You basically, everything's open and available to you. It's a very targeted experience, and the customer is getting a hands-on high fidelity chance to actually work with your product. So I'll show a little bit of an example of how this all works later on in the webinar. Some of the disadvantages of this, just not listed out here, but are the converse of what we were talking about earlier, which is you're not going to have a very large group experience, and you're not really going to have the opportunity to have random encounters in a very controlled setting. So obviously there's different times that you would use either of these technologies, but we think this is a really interesting way, and are excited to tell you a little bit more about it. So I'm going to go ahead and hand this over to Matthias now, and he's going to talk us through some of the different ways that our customers and ourselves have been using this technology. Here we go, Matthias. I'm handing it over to you.
Oh, yeah. Then I'm sure you can hear me now, right?
Yes,
so
I got you.
Let me share my web camera here and start presenting this. So yeah, I'll talk a little bit about experiences, and that is really one of the reasons that we had this webinar, because we concluded that we basically have like enough experience, we think, with ourselves and a bunch of our clients to tell others about like what works for using virtual reality for replacing, I would say, one aspect of trade shows. And Dan has already pointed that out. So like WorldViz, we as a company, I think in 1 year I was at 35 trade shows. So I've been at the trade show floor a lot myself. And in terms of like what you do at the trade show floor, yes, sometimes you're just hanging out at the booth and answering people who come by. But in many cases, you have meetings lined up at the trade show floor, and they're targeted meetings. Like you basically wait for a certain prospect or customer to come by at a certain time. And then usually you're using whatever you have set up at your booth in order to give them a practical demo of like whatever the new aspects of your products are or whatever you want to show. And that aspect of the trade show is something that we have a reasonably good way of replacing that. And it's obviously nothing's ever perfect, but for these one-on-one meetings, we have figured out that there's ways to do those without having a trade show. And I talk about some examples that we have seen in different industries. The one obvious industry is manufacturing, where you basically build products that are sometimes large. And in fact, for manufacturing industry, virtual reality was already interesting before the whole COVID crisis, because it allows you to show a larger variety of your products, or sometimes products that you couldn't even show at a trade show, to customers. Now, what we see with companies that are using it in that industry is that in many cases, they combine local experience centers at their offices, at different office locations, where they can do still face-to-face customer meetings if it's possible, and with basically other methods that are remote. And for the remote methods, we have seen a bunch of companies now starting to use this VizBox paradigm, like to send a encapsulated system out to these VIP meeting clients, and then really to have the meeting in virtual reality. And yeah, so we have seen that work. Like I've seen that work myself, because I'm myself sometimes using the same method in order to show a prospective client what they would be able to do with virtual reality. So we're using virtual reality to present virtual reality solutions, and yeah, it's extremely personal, and in many cases it ends up to be a much longer and much more intense meeting than someone was previously anticipating, and definitely it's at the level of a face-to-face meeting that someone would have at a trade show. So that's the manufacturing industry. Like another industry that we have seen use cases, actually from several clients, is the wider AV industry. Again, virtual reality already made sense to a certain extent before COVID, because same for manufacturing, for AV industry, it's important to show a prospective client what they are going to get and how it's going to look like. If you build up a large projection entertainment system, or you build out a conference room, or if you, let's say, put a projector into a church, like in all of those cases, it's good for the end customer to understand how this is going to look and feel like, and virtual reality allows to actually do that. But like specifically for the AV industry, we have made an add-on to a platform, Vizible, which allows you to actually show a projection system in virtual reality in a pretty easy fashion. And so we use that ourselves when we show prospective clients about how the systems fit into their rooms. And we have now seen several of our clients starting to use that as well. And it's obviously a pretty good way of using virtual reality. One of the other industries we have seen traction, again, already before COVID, but certainly now during the COVID times, is construction. when you have a modification that needs to be made to an existing space, or if you have a new space that needs to be built out. In both of those cases, it's very important to present with the decision makers about like what the options are and to make decisions about those options. And now with the remote deployed system with the Viz boxes, it's possible to do that in a very efficient manner, because you can immerse like people at different locations into the future layout of a space or a room, or and then discuss different layout options and make decisions. For these kind of setups, we have seen like several times that it makes actually still sense, even during COVID, to fly someone out and prepare the meeting in a way of bringing a bunch of Viz boxes in, and then but then have part of the meeting be remote and part of the meeting being on site, depending on what can be arranged for. So we have seen that kind of method work when you have someone coming out with a couple of Viz boxes and then having the decision makers hop into the Viz boxes with consultants from external locations and make these decisions. So definitely something that can be done. And if it's a VIP setting and it's necessary to make these decisions, it's a very efficient way of actually doing that. So now throughout all these examples, what have we learned? For those high-end, I would say high-end. So basically, it's not a phone-based type application. It's a PC-based application because it needs to be graphically really detailed. For those high-end kind of virtual reality meetings, we have found that at this point in time, it's very highly recommended to have end-to-end control on hardware. And what I mean with that is that basically there is hardware that is in the control of the presenter used on both sides, which means there is basically either hardware carried out to the client or shipped to the client, and the hardware control stays within the presenter's kind of grasp. And what that does is it avoids all these issues that someone would see if you try to use someone else's hardware, like virus scanners, like software that might interfere, like in many cases certain firewall settings. So it's really important to stay as much as possible out of all that lower level, like driver related or traffic related issues. It gives a higher chance to make this a very successful showing. Then next, we have learned that it's always important to have a dedicated contact on the customer side, because when you're working on the customer side, someone has to set up these Viz boxes. Even there's not much setup to be done, and Felix will show that they just go on a table, they get plugged into power, and they get connected to the internet. But still, that needs to be done. And also, the next point, a practice session before the big VIP demo is recommended, just to make sure that everything works, right? And typically, that initial setup and practice session is like a half an hour effort, but then it really makes sure that the meeting, the VIP meeting, is going well. So there needs to be a person on the other side who also wants to see that happen. And it's obviously, it's the same for any presentation. Targeted presentation material is key. So if you give a presentation to someone who wants to put a projector into a church, then certainly it'd be good to have some kind of a model that represents the church and some kind of a way of showing how this projector would look like, or how the projection screen would look like, and what the different options are, right? And for any of such clients that want to use this technology, it's good to show something that's meaningful for them. Ideally, even show something that is actually some of their own stuff. Then that connection to, oh, this can be used is instantly. And last but not least, I kind of mentioned it earlier, we have found that once you have a successful meeting schedule, people don't want to get out of the meeting anymore. That's kind of a weird thing, because usually one is always happy to take that virtual reality device off your head. But once you're in there with a bunch of other people and there's meaningful content to discuss, then suddenly the time flies. And I found myself in meetings like one time I remember I had scheduled half an hour with an overseas client in England, and I was in there for 2.5 hours. And so and the client didn't want to leave. He wanted to see more and more options and discuss more and more things. And so we have seen that. That's an extreme example, but we have seen in many cases that once the meeting is going on and successful, then the clients they want to stay in there, and they want to see more, they want to discuss more, and they don't even realize to a certain extent that they are in VR during the meeting, because they just focus on the problems they want to discuss. So yeah, that's basically in a nutshell things we have seen. And now, in order for you guys to see something, we have my colleague Felix Rudert in our warehouse, and who is going to show some Viz boxes over there. So I switch my camera off and my presentation screen off, and Felix comes.
Hey everyone. Yeah, I'm actually not in the warehouse. I'm in our conference room here. And yeah, I'm going to show you how easy it is to set up a Viz box once it gets delivered to the client, for example. I'm using a Viz box here to run this presentation, but I have another one over there that I'm going to show that I'm going to use for the demonstration. So let's assume this Viz box just got delivered by FedEx to the client, and I'm the client, so I can just bring it in. And it rolls around pretty nicely, and it can be picked up easily, put on the table. So I open it up, and the first thing I see is the laptops. It's the top tray here that has the laptop in it, and you might be able to see the laptop already has the connectors for everything plugged in. So everything is already plugged in. Underneath the laptop here is essentially the storage compartment. So we have the headset, the controllers. I'm going to take those out, put them on the table here. And the headset is in there nice and snugly, so that it doesn't get damaged in shipping. A note on that is, the foam is keeping everything really safe, and we also include some disinfectant wipes. So typically when we send out the Viz box, before we send it out, we disinfect everything. But some customers might not trust this and want to do another round of disinfecting themselves. And so yeah, we include the disinfectant wipes so that it can be done. And let me plug the power in really quick. And everything can be wiped down from the headsets, the part that touches your face, the controllers, the phone, the laptop. Everything can be disinfected. So I'm gonna open the laptop up here, and it powered right on. I'm gonna log in, and so now I might, depending on your application, I might have to connect to my local internet. I'm already connected via Wi-Fi here. Or there might be a standalone application, which is what I'm going to show you here right now. So I'm just gonna start the application. And made one mistake, have to start the headset first. And of course, it is finishing up an update as usual, like in the demonstration. So now I can start the application. And with that, I'm in VR, and I'm going to hand it back to Dan.
Awesome, thanks, Felix. Let me go ahead and make myself the presenter here, and I'm gonna have to There we go. And I'm back. Um, so yeah, thank you, Matthias and Felix, for kind of walking through the process there in terms of just how we're doing this, right? And hopefully this is becoming clear. Once again, ask your questions. I know we've gotten a couple questions so far, so we'll definitely address those at the end. Um, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the experience itself, because we can think about the logistics and how it's all going to work, but ultimately it's about the experience that your customer is having in the virtual environment. From our perspective, if we're working within this, kind of world that we've outlined here, Matthias has alluded to this a little bit already. It's really kind of about showing your product, right? Um, the cool thing about the Vizible VR platform that I'll talk about in just a second is that it allows you to just really easily bring in different pieces of content. So you can see this is actually my colleague Sato working here on and this is just the way that the program looks. So it's not a crazy type of 3D modeling software or anything like that. It's a very drag and drop software that allows you to just bring in different pieces of content and create, what we like to think of as engaging interactions in terms of being able to pick things up, animate things, just having the option to really um, uh, make this interactive and really take advantage of the immersive aspects of virtual reality. Um, the one thing that I will say sort of up front before we dive into this content creation process is it's good to consider the flow of the experience. For us, we're oftentimes doing a fairly deep dive into our background as technologists. So our standard virtual reality presentations include a lot of background content that are actually introducing people to VR. Um, so it's a pretty cool experience that scripted out is about 20 to 30 minutes if you're just going quickly. So it's a pretty serious thing. And the really cool thing about these types of presentations is it's being led by a human in real time, right? So you don't have to program like an avatar or somebody to do all of these different. You don't have to have a virtual docent that you've spent weeks and weeks making. You actually have human intelligence behind it, so that allows it to kind of be expansive, also to adjust to questions from the audience on the fly. So that's just one thing that I would advise. A lot of our manufacturing customers, our healthcare customers, they're having fairly targeted demonstrations that are really more about, let's experience this product, or in many cases, they're actually talking about a specific installation. So they'll actually get a client floor plan and put the products that they're proposing in that floor plan. So that's a really, a targeted way of doing this. And in that case, it's a little bit more straightforward because you're really just saying, hey, this is exactly what we're going to do. Let's go in and talk about it. But there's also opportunities to bring in slideshows, to bring in videos. If you want to give somebody some background on your company, there's really a lot of opportunities for that. So I'm just going to show this short video, and you guys can find this video on our YouTube page. We also, this is one of many different webinars that we've done this year. So you'll also be able to find more of our webinars. But this is, I think, came out about a year and a half ago. It's a really good video in terms of just showing the content creation process. So if you're interested in this, I would highly recommend going and watching this video. It's only about 4 or 5 minutes long. But I just wanted to highlight a couple of the features really fast here. So in the Vizible VR program, basically you have the option to create a virtual reality presentation, right? And we're really focused on the headset market. People who are in headsets, you're coming in, you're talking with each other, your avatars, you're embodied, you have controllers, you can pick things up. So not even just headsets, but the really type of high-end PC-based headsets. But on the content creation side, as some of you who are probably VR developers know, it can be a little bit complicated. So this tool is really making it as easy as possible. So I'll just pause for 1 second here. So what we just did was we just pulled a model in to create the background environment. You're basically just choosing where your meeting's going to take place. Then you choose where the presenter and where the attendee are going to be. And then you can bring in different props. So, different products, different objects to help illustrate your point. So all of these are just stored in a cloud library, like locally or up in the cloud as well. So you can just literally drag and drop a model right in and move it around, position it. And then what's not shown here, but the next step is you can actually right click on that object and attach different types of interactivity. So you can add the ability to grab it, or you can add an animation where you have it move around or something like that. So it's obviously a fairly sophisticated and large scale program. So I'm not going to go all the way into the details right now. And I would definitely recommend you check out this video on our YouTube. But the last thing I will say is it follows this kind of PowerPoint style content creation method. So if you can see right here on the left, there's virtual slides. So the way that we actually build our presentations is exactly the same way that I built this presentation for this webinar here, which is on slide one, you've got your story kind of laid out in front of you. Slide one is going to be your entry slide, where basically you're going to come in and you're going to be looking at each other. And then you as the presenter, you as the person who's creating this, you're basically going to click to the next virtual slide. And the next virtual slide will take you maybe to a previous example of a customer installation or something like that you've got some kind of capture of. So that's just an example. You're basically just have to kind of get your PowerPoint mindset into a three-dimensional space. And I think that's why it's really nice and accessible for people. So I'll talk a little bit more about where this content's actually coming from. Some of the key components are really going to be the 3D models themselves, right? There's different online content libraries that you can check out. A lot of free options out there these days. There's obviously a lot of 3D modeling programs as well. We primarily use 3ds Max, but there's Maya, Blender, tons of other ones. Those are really going to give you the most control in terms of being able to build something from scratch or from reference photos and things like that. And then this new technology, photogrammetry, which we've mentioned pretty often in our webinars, really cool. It gives you the ability, if you haven't heard of it before, it's absolutely worth looking into in more detail. Photogrammetry is giving you the option to take, about 90 pictures of an object. You're basically taking pictures at every angle and with a lot of light on the object, and then you can punch it into an algorithm, all those 90 pictures, and it'll basically slurp out a finished, polished looking 3D model that's actually almost photorealistic in its quality. So that's a really nice option for folks. It's something that can definitely be done on a DIY basis, but at the same time, it's also a bit of an undertaking in terms of the effort. So keep that in mind. It's maybe easier than 3D modeling itself, but still definitely some effort. Another thing that's actually even easier than I think photogrammetry is 360 content. So 360 content really is, you can get a camera, a 360 camera. I've got one that was about $400 called the Theta, but there's definitely more like prosumer ones in the $2,500 range. But you can basically just put a 3D camera down or a 360 camera down and capture a space. The limitation with 360 is always going to be that you're limited to just that one capture spot. You're not having the ability to move your head around. You're basically in a fishbowl, right? But what's cool about the Vizible program is that you actually, when you open up that 360, it expands around the audience, and everyone's in the fishbowl together. So you can actually use like your laser pointer tool to point out different features of an environment. So there's some really cool 360 aspects to Vizible, and in general, it's an effective way to capture a space and share it with an audience. The last thing you're really going to want to look at is interactive elements in the space. This could be animations. A lot of times what we're doing is, and a lot of our customers are actually doing this kind of triggering thing where, especially if you're working with machinery, some kind of advanced, medical device, you want to really kind of simulate the experience that the end user is going to have. So you want to be able to push a button and show, an MRI machine open up, or you want to push a button and show, how these different things work. A lot of what we've done is actually related to what are called booms in operating rooms. So what you can actually do is you can have a fully articulated boom. We use a technique called inverse kinematics to define the articulation of a boom. And then a doctor or a nurse, the end user of the space, can actually go in there and move that boom around and really see what the actual full range of motion of these devices is. So, there's a lot of different things. I think it's worth really thinking about what you want to show people in VR, and then, talking to us, looking around what options there are for development. And, we can certainly have a consultation with folks and let them know what, the rough challenges or the best path for implementation might be. Just like I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of really interesting places to get 3D models these days if you don't want to build your own. Sketchfab, I think if you haven't been to Sketchfab yet, you should definitely check this website out. It's got some really cool stuff. A lot of these are, hyper realistic type of photogrammetry models that are free to download. So, you can actually have a pretty cool space and environment, right? So if you're looking just for a nice room like this, for example, is a nice office space that you could just host a virtual meeting in, this is a great place to look and find some awesome models. But when it comes down to making it your own, this is where things get a little bit more challenging, and I alluded to this earlier. But for our customers, most important thing is almost always going to be bringing your own products into the space, right? For our manufacturing engineering customers, a lot of times we're starting with a CAD model. CAD models, as you can kind of see here, a little blocky. They're not exactly ready for virtual reality. The things that CAD models are made for are really for engineering purposes, right? So it's not really a real-time rendering environment. So or like a nicely lighted model like this. So to get from here to here can take a little bit of time, a little bit of expertise. There are some tools out there that automate the process to a certain degree. But if you want something to really come out looking like this polished with the lighting effects, the shaders and things like that, you're very likely going to want to have a 3D artist kind of come in and touch something up at some point. So that is just to say that there's, to keep in mind that there's going to be some kind of workflow from your CAD to your kind of polished product presentation space. It really can be pretty minimal. We are doing this a lot for our customers as a service. So I think, just to kind of keep in mind, there's options for bringing new products in. Photogrammetry is one of them, but this is definitely the more traditional one. And oftentimes folks are doing it in-house. I would say 90% of the time they're doing it in-house. But if you're looking for a service, you can come to WorldViz. There's certainly other 3D artists, workers out there who you can certainly hire on an hourly basis as well to help kind of convert these environments. So on that kind of note about cost, why don't we jump into what it costs to do this. So hopefully at this point, you all have kind of gotten a good understanding of what we're proposing in terms of how you might replace a trade show with these very targeted client meetings, right? This is something we've done many times. So we have a pretty good idea of what the pricing model looks like. In terms of the hardware, the VizBox that you saw earlier, that's going to start at around $5,000. We also have a higher end model that actually uses eye tracking technology. So that's really more for our research and kind of training customers. Eye tracking is a really interesting topic. We have a ton of videos on it. Did a couple of webinars on it a few months back. So if you're interested in that topic, I definitely invite you to check that out. But I would say for most people, unless you're doing some really intense consumer research, you're probably not going to need eye tracking in your basic headset. For just getting started, if you just want to kind of have a laptop and a VR headset especially if you're presenting to an audience, if you've got your home setup, you don't necessarily need your own sophisticated, ruggedized VR kit. You can just get started with a laptop and a VR headset. I would put that at about $2,000 now, especially if you're going to get like a Vive or one of the higher end headsets. You could also get an Oculus Rift S, which is something we use a lot. That's about $400. And then a gaming laptop is gonna, if you're just getting one off of Amazon, you're talking about, $1,200 to $1,500, depending on how much hardware you're really looking to get. In terms of the software subscription, this Vizible program that I've been talking about, it's available at $250 per month per user. I would say the typical enterprise customer is paying between $3,000 and $12,000 a year for the software. Typical subscription is about $3,000 to $6,000. You may need that higher end subscription enterprise model if you want to have like larger meetings, or especially if you're doing multiple meetings. So we ourselves, Andy, our chief scientist, might be giving one meeting and I'll be giving another meeting, right? Having these simultaneous meetings going on would require a more advanced subscription. But for the most part, I think people are doing pretty well with these more $3,000 to $6,000 subscriptions per year. So that's just kind of giving you an idea of the range of the software costs. In terms of custom development, obviously a lot of our customers, the nice thing about the Vizible platform is that you can build your own content really easily without having to program anything. All of these features are built in. But the custom development costs, if you wanted to have us build a presentation for you, and that would include, CAD conversion, for example. So if you had a CAD schematic of your product, you could send it over to us and we'd clean it up and then put it into a presentation and a Vizible presentation, show you how to use it, send you the Viz boxes and everything. So the development itself would start at about $10,000. I would say that's kind of the minimum cost for just building something top to bottom in terms of a simple VR presentation. Obviously, for these larger scale things, it can get a lot more involved. So, the cost of developing a full-blown VR application is, oftentimes going to be in excess of $100,000. What's really nice about Vizible is because it's so simple, there's no programming. It's really just about the art assets and consulting with the customer and just, the kind of day-to-day things that we can actually keep those costs pretty low in terms of just starting out. So if you were to say, and this is what most customers I would say do when they want to kind of do this for the first time, what we call a top to bottom solution or soup to nuts, that's really going to start at a minimum of about $20,000. And that includes content development, all the hardware, so maybe like 2 Viz boxes, subscription to the software. That's really what you're looking at. More typical cost is probably going to be pushing it up to about 30, because a lot of times we'll recommend maybe having some additional support or some training, things along those lines. So $20,000 to $30,000 is really what you're looking at as your entry level cost for just having this content built out for you, having the hardware provided, and having the software platform as well. What's cool about this, and I think what a lot of people find after they've done it, is that you can leverage this material in lots of different ways besides VR. A lot of folks will actually do screen capture of a video, or they'll even screencast a VR presentation out to a wider audience. So it's not just a one size fits all in terms of I can only use this in the context of a VR presentation to a VIP client. It definitely has other marketing applications that are pretty interesting. So, obviously making videos or being able to demonstrate things, and then just having the ability to show your client what the product looks like in their space, for a lot of people is really what they're looking for. So I hope this has been really kind of, interesting and enlightening for you all in terms of what we do and how we do it. If there's anything we can clarify here, obviously the questions are open. I think we're about to get into our Q&A now. And that is, are the consumer-facing VR solutions leveraging VR headsets or computer screens? And this is a great question. I definitely could have clarified this a little bit better earlier on. I would say that what's interesting about these consumer technologies, we're talking about Mozilla Hubs, AltSpace. AltSpace, I would say, is definitely more like targeted at VR headset users. Mozilla Hubs is kind of open to both. It's being able to pick your avenue, being able to select the way that you're going into the meeting, having the ability to use a computer, because not everybody has a VR headset. If you're leveraging these consumer technologies, I think you're going to want to allow for people not to have VR headsets, because it's simply most people still don't have them. That's why in our kind of targeted scenario, we're actually providing all of the hardware, because you don't know what the end user has in terms of, I'm working off of a pretty powerful gaming laptop right now, right? But I need to do that for the meetings that I host. But you can't really guarantee that the person on the other end is going to have appropriate hardware. So having a lighter weight technology that can leverage computer screens, and then for those who are interested in using VR, joining in, but that almost is putting it more in like a second life category. So it's kind of an interesting space. I would say that in a way, we're very VR like purists, very VR centric in our approach, where we think, having the headset on, high interactivity, fully embodied real-time avatars and voice, so that people are having this kind of one-on-one communication with each other. That's like where it's getting to this very exciting and next level space. But I think when you're looking at just how can I make this as easy as possible for the greatest number of people who I don't have to talk to ahead of time, something where they can just join using a laptop or a tablet, is probably going to be the easier way. And those types of things like Verbella and hubs have set themselves up to be that. So that's hopefully answering your question a little bit better. Yeah. Go ahead.
Then I think I can contribute from some practical use cases. So we have seen cases where people are running like Vizible with multiple participants in an immersed virtual reality setting, but we're like in this case, one of the VPs of the company was always running it just on his desktop to watch everything that's going on from kind of a God's eye perspective. But he wasn't really planning to actively participate. Sometimes he was jumping in by voice and giving some instructions or direction, right? When you're doing it from a desktop, specifically from a God's eye perspective, you kind of have an overview of what everybody is doing, but you're not really actively part of it, like, because it's not immersive, right? But we have seen the use case where a VP wants to just watch what the guys are doing and how the room is configured while maybe he's doing something else, and so he can run Vizible on his desktop, and that might have a use case if you just wanna see what's going on. It doesn't have a very high use case if you want to be part of the meeting, but yeah, so that's practical cases we have seen where it's combined.
Yeah, so I'm noticing we actually have a couple other questions that were asked here. So I think just as a follow-up to that question is somebody asked if looks like Christian asked if they have an Oculus Quest, can they use it? A lot of times the Oculus Quest is going to be compatible with these lighter weight spaces. So I don't know if the Oculus Quest is working with hubs unless you've tethered. That'd be something that I'd have to research a little bit more. But I believe these other platforms, certainly AltSpace, which is set up around kind of the Facebook ecosphere, is going to support the Quest, right? So there's different options for that. In terms of a specific VR trade show, we did share out an example earlier, and we'll just go ahead and email you a link to that for the one that's coming up. I think that'll be interesting. It's hard to say if these upcoming virtual trade shows, a lot of these are really more like webinars than they are going to be like these actual one-to-one replacements. I think, Matthias, if you probably agree with that, wouldn't you? Yeah.
Yes. Maybe to answer the Quest specifically, the Quest works with our ecosystem when there's a cable and people are using it just as an HMD. But in terms of like these, how would I say, second lifestyle, like kind of trade show replacements, if the goal is to see like attention to a booth and to see which other people are kind of looking at stuff at the booth, like almost in a gamified experience, then I would say the virtual reality headset and the immersiveness doesn't have a really high value in that setting, right? Because if it's easier to do it on a computer screen and to go through that like Second Life or like World of Warcraft, or like basically just with using mouse and keyboard and maneuvering around, looking at people's trade show offerings, then really like what does the headset buy you? It's not buying you much, if anything. So like we do think that the headset has a high value in personal face-to-face meetings, and that's basically what our focus is here, where we can help with. But for these kind of gamified experiences, I personally am not a big believer. But that's really a personal opinion. It's not really based on much experience. But from what I've seen is that most people participate in that. They just do it over their computer screens in such meetings. I've participated in a bunch of them.
Yeah. The one kind of final follow-up question here, also from Christian, regards the Stadia, which I'm just going to use the Stadia as more of a stand-in for all cloud-based rendering solutions, right? So I think that's a really interesting space that will be leveraged in the future a lot more. And cloud-based rendering basically means that you can just have, a server farm in Eastern Washington doing all the number crunching, so you can have an incredibly detailed VR experience without having to have a crazy laptop or something at home. And I think this technology is still kind of developing, and that's going to be a really awesome space, I think, in the future. But for the time being, it's not really something that I think is like, right now in 2020 trade show season, can I leverage cloud rendering for my presentation? I don't think there's really a consumer or even enterprise facing solution that's going to give you that access. The final question here, I'm seeing from Willem, which is, do you have experiences with educational applications at a university level? Where else? We're still getting more questions. This is great. So I'll speak to this one first. In terms of your experience with educational applications at a university level, I would say both yes and no, because we've worked with academic institutions for a long time. We actually helped develop some content with Stanford a few years ago, where like the ocean acidification experience. If you go ahead and go to the Steam store, you go to the Oculus store, you can actually find that application. It's free to download. It's a really cool, pretty early days of VR application where you can see the effects of climate change actually on a underwater ecosystem. So we helped co-develop that with Stanford. Another one we helped work on as well as Becoming Homeless. Those are more almost like, so Becoming Homeless is also free to download, and I would say is a more contemporary VR experience. So I'd recommend if you have a Steam or Oculus at home, checking those out, just to see what's out there, and they're recommended free applications too. In terms of, I would say instead of being an educational space, those are educational content, but they're more like a production, like a single user studio type experience, where if like, you're going to go home and do VR in your bedroom, and I'm going through a scripted experience. More for like the educational, like let's replace a university lecture setting. Again, a lot of folks want these things to tie into like a system like Blackboard or something like that, where you've got your management of students. We can certainly have a hosted experience, like, if I wanted to show somebody different molecular structures and show it to my students, our platform would work for that. But it's really more set up as a presentation space, so it's not connecting to all of your student data resources, and it would be more of a small group experience. So we're currently, right around 5 to 6 or 7 users, so more like a lab size. And part of the reason for that is because everybody's fully embodied as an avatar in the space. They're talking and moving. They've got head and hands, very high interactivity. So it does lend itself to that kind of application. We actually have built a lot of training applications which are adjacent to educational experiences, for things like retail workers, sort of emergency responders, things like that. So if you're interested in maybe having a conversation about what it would look like to build out some educational content, I'd be happy to have that conversation. So I'll follow up a little later. Let me just see if we've got any other. So another question related to the kind of cloud-based rendering, it seems like, in terms of streaming to a smartphone-based VR users. I'm not super aware of any option right now to stream from an expo to a smartphone user. I know like early on there were, maybe Matthias, some stuff. There were some like live event streaming for like 360 stuff. Are any of those tools still available these days? I haven't heard much about them lately.
I don't think I can answer that on the fly. That would take a little research. Like the universe of tools right now is still pretty dynamic. Even in preparation for this webinar, when researching like what we call second lifestyle trade show experiences, they used to be like 5 players, and I think there's like right now between probably 30 and 50 different companies making such trade show, like kind of game style trade show replacements applications. And so the same is true for live streaming. It's a dynamic marketplace right now, so I don't have a straight up answer, and there's also no recommendations. That would require some research who is currently the front runner. As most people know, Apple has purchased NextVR, which is one of the companies that have specialized in live streaming. Intel has also purchased one of the companies. So there is some of the big players also getting into that game, and it's not clear if they are going to combine it with proprietary hardware technology, or maybe in Intel's case with certain chip features. So that has to be seen.
Yeah. I think for now that's I definitely want to kind of take one of these conversations offline. So I'll be having a follow up with those who are asking questions right now. And yeah, just wanted to thank everybody for their time. I think we're right at the 10 o'clock hour here, so we'll probably shut this down for now. But you know, you can reach out to us at any time here. I'll actually put up our kind of follow up here. We'll be sending out a survey in the next couple of days, and we'd really appreciate it if you guys could let us know what you thought about this webinar. You can also obviously check out our YouTube channel. You can reach us at sales@worldviz.com, contact@worldviz.com. You can email us directly. We also have a contact form. So, you know, we'd love to hear from you and what you thought about this presentation. And if you've got an idea for how you'd like to do more dynamic customer interaction, now that trade shows are kind of off the table for the time being, we'd love to hear from you and give you a hand with that. So looking forward to reaching out and connecting in the future. And thanks, Matthias.
Just to add that, if you want to meet in virtual reality, let us know as well. Like we can certainly accommodate for individual meeting requests, and if you want to just experience for yourself what it feels like, we can provide for that. Just send us an email. So thanks a lot. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks everybody. Talk to you soon. Yep. Bye-bye.